Brent Soderlin, City Engineer, please introduce the presentation.
Sure. Dylan, can you bring up the presentation, please? All right. So Dylan, is Michael Rank also on board?
Brent, yep, I moved Michael over as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight, I will be presenting a proposed update to the city's traffic calming policy. With me tonight, I have Michael Rank, the city's traffic engineer, who will be assisting me with any questions. Just as an overview, I will be covering the purpose and need, a review of the city's existing traffic calming policy and implementation levels, the 85th percentile speed, recommended revisions to the traffic calming policy, and implementing engineering devices. Can you go to the next slide, please? The purpose and need for this presentation is that we did bring the current traffic calming policy to the January 11th City Council study session. City Council asked us to review the current policy and bring back some recommendations for your review and input. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the traffic calming policy is to create a uniform set of guidelines to address traffic concerns raised by our citizens. Traffic calming can include trying to reduce speeds, increase safety, and reduce accidents. Next slide, please. So there are 3 implementation levels in our current traffic calming policy, and they are all based upon the 85th percentile speed. The 85th percentile speed is a speed at or below which 85% of drivers feel comfortable operating their vehicle under favorable conditions. The basis for the 85th percentile speed is that this is a speed that most drivers will operate based on how they feel and based on visual cues as they're driving. So this would be such things as the width of the lane, the width of shoulders, the presence of vertical or horizontal curves, any sight distance or obstructions, and the presence of surrounding developments to the roadway. So all these factors create what I call visual friction, which affects the speed of drivers. Next slide, please. So level 1 under the current policy is when the 85th percentile speed is 4 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So under level 1, no traffic calming measures are warranted. We do review the integrity of the data. The requester may request the data for their review, and they may ask for another study after 6 months. Next slide, please. So level 2 under our existing policy is when the 85th percentile speed is between 4 and 7 miles an hour of the posted speed limit. We use education and enforcement to address speeding issues under level 2. We do review the existing signage. There is directed patrol by the PD. Also, the PD may place their speed radar feedback signs along the roadways to try to educate the public. And we would also consider other public outreach measures. Next slide, please. So level 3 under the current traffic calming policy is when the 85th percentile speed is 7 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So again, we would use a combination of education, enforcement, and traffic engineering solutions. And we'd also use physical devices such as speed humps. Again, the signage is reviewed. There's directed patrol by the PD. We may place speed radar signs along the roadway. Other public outreach methods might be considered, and we would design and install devices such as speed humps. Next slide, please. So recommended revisions to the traffic calming policy are to lower the 85th percentile speed thresholds. Level 1 would be less than 3 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. Level 2 would be between 3 and 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. And level 3 would be if it was greater than 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. We also have some recommendations for when we would put physical traffic calming devices on residential, collector, and arterial roadways. Next slide, please. So as I said, level 1 revision would be the 85th percentile speed would be less than 3 miles over the posted speed limit. So for residential, collector, and arterial roadways, no traffic calming measures would be taken at level 1. Next slide, please. Level 2 revisions would be the 85th percentile speed would be between 3 and 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. We would use education and enforcement to address speeding issues under this method, and this would apply to residential, collector, and arterial roadways. Staff has developed a neighborhood traffic calming educational document that we would distribute. Next slide, please. Level 3 revisions would be the 85th percentile speed would be 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So generally, residential roads are posted at 25 miles an hour. So within the city, if cars are traveling over 30 miles an hour on residential roads, they would fall under level 3 now. So the state model traffic code sets residential speed limits at 30 miles an hour. So we thought that that was a good threshold to set for our upper limit. So we would, traffic calming methods include education, enforcement, traffic engineering methods, and physical engineering devices such as speed humps. Staff did review speed data from the past 4 years, and we think that if we did make revisions or make these revisions to the policy, that we'd add an additional 5 street segments that would qualify for speed humps. Next slide, please. So level 3 for arterial and collector roadways, we would have the same 85th percentile speed threshold of 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. Would we want to use a combination of education, enforcement, and alternative traffic calming methods, such as reviewing the signage. Maybe we'd place speed radar signs or look at maybe some striping modifications. For collector and arterials, we're not recommending that we would put any kind of physical device such as a speed hump on those roadways. And that would include not putting speed humps on our priority 1 or 2 snow routes. Next slide, please. So when we do implement physical devices such as speed humps, we would have an outreach to the affected neighborhood. A petition would be circulated, and all properties immediately adjacent to the device would have to be in favor. Engineering would present our solution to the PD, street maintenance, fire district, and the affected schools. Each of those agencies would give us feedback, and we would try to address any adverse impacts to their operations. Engineering would determine the source of funds to put in the traffic calming devices. If funding was limited, we might have to place some of those projects on hold until funds are budgeted. Next slide, please. So at this time, we're available to answer any of your questions.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was just curious on 12 slide, on slide number 12. I mean, if I understood it correctly, is that saying that we would increase the speed limit by 5 from 25 to 30?
No, Councilwoman Alan Thomas. What I'm saying is that the speed limit would still be set at 25 miles an hour. It's just that our threshold for when we would put a physical engineering device on a roadway would be 30 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, which is 25. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
So you're not, it would still remain at 25, then you're not increasing it.
Correct, it would still remain at 25.
Okay. And then I was curious too, why does it take so long to get the data on the reports? But because it took like 4 years. Is there a reason that you guys know why it takes so long to get the data back?
So are you speaking about trying to get speed data back?
Yes.
Yeah, so we get our speed data through the PD. And so we do get a number of requests. And so it just depends on how fast they can get us the speed data back.
Okay. Yeah, because another just concern on slide 14 where it said there's funding limitations may be on hold. So it seems like we've waited 4 years already. So I'm just curious, and I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but since we've waited 4 years, is there some kind of way that funding can be added at least yearly?
So Councilwoman Allen Thomas, so we do have a traffic calming CIPP budget, but because of COVID, we did not put any money for 2021. So that's why I put that caveat in the slide. So we are requesting, I believe it's $30,000 for next year for our CIPP budget.
Okay. And so after that, will it be yearly then?
Yes, that's something that I have projected yearly into our CIPP budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes, if I could follow on to the question by Councilmember Allen Thomas, I think there might be a wee bit of confusion with respect to the reference to 4 years. The actual collection of the data and getting that information probably takes between 30 and 60 days to actually get the study data back, depending on the availability of the resources from PD. The reference to the 4 years was what Brent and his team did was they went back and reviewed the last 4 years of data. And from that review, changing or adjusting these speed limits, lowering or ratcheting them down would probably result with the addition of 5 more street segments getting some sort of physical traffic calming measures done to it per year. I hope that clarifies that a bit more.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Any other? Councilmember Noble?
Thank you very much, Brent. I have, I think my question has more to do with the base number, the base speed. I've received a lot of complaints from residents in the Reunion Buffalo Run area about 112th. And 112th is 40 miles per hour as the maximum speed, as opposed to 30 miles per hour in residential areas. So if you're already at 40, then someone speeding might, be upwards of, say, 45 and not necessarily get themselves in trouble. But that makes a lot of noise as a car is traveling that fast in a pretty residential area. The only non-residential part is just that small area where the golf course is. And apparently the cars then, as they travel at 40 miles an hour down 112th, then turn up Parkside and don't suddenly drop their speed. I had put in this as a request and the response back was, well, it's 40 miles per hour, so we don't need any traffic calming. I would suggest that 40 miles per hour is actually too high and that it should be 30 miles per hour on 112th.
So Councilwoman Noble, so 112th Avenue is actually classified as, I think it's a modified arterial under our transportation plan. And so that's why the speed limit is set at 40 miles an hour.
How would we change that? There are homes that back up to it. There are the Columbine Ranch homes that are in Adams County. There's a whole raft of carriage homes that are being built along 112th. I think that it's something we need to look at to consider it residential rather than with the emphasis on the commercial side, because 40 miles per hour is very fast there when you have all of these homes along that stretch.
And I will say it is wide open on 112th, so, you know, and it's straight. And so that is probably why folks are speeding along there. I will
Right.
add, we did put in two rectangular rapid flashing beacons on 112th to try to get the vehicle's attention when we have pedestrians crossing. As far as changing the speed limit, I suppose we would have to do some kind of study in order to do that. I guess Joe, I don't know if you have any recommendations on how we could possibly change the speed limit on 112th if we needed to.
So what we could do, appreciating that it has been identified as a modified arterial, and that's because of the route in which the residential and collectors are adding to that road, then the amount of traffic and the design parameters of the road typically allow or permit that road to be driven at 40 miles per hour, if you will, based on the architecture of the road and the actual design intent of that road with the number of vehicles that it takes. It sounds as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Noble, is that as much of concern with the speed is actually the noise. That may not necessarily be the rate of speed that they're traveling, but the noise that's generated because of the speed. And unfortunately, we have a lot of homes that back up to that road.
I'm probably putting words in constituents' mouths. All I know is that they have complained about the speed on 112th and that they use it as a speedway. The drivers use it as a speedway because, as was pointed out, it is a straight shot. And then as they come up onto Parkside and enter Reunion, they're still traveling at that speed. And in fact, it changes down to, I don't know what it changes down to, maybe 30 at that corner at Parkside Drive. There will be a lot of ingress and egress along that strip when all of those homes get finished in that area. And there certainly are a considerable number already on the north side of the street. I just, I think I was so surprised to get the answer that there was no issue regarding traffic calming about it. And then to learn that it's because it's 40 miles per hour as opposed to other residential areas. So I hope that there would be some way that we can keep an eye on this, just because I think it's, you know, as they say, an accident waiting to happen just because it's so speedy along there.
Absolutely, and there's a few things that we can do just to kind of set the table, if you will. We can do a speed study on there to verify the actual speeds that are being traveled. And secondly, we can do some engineering kind of methods to slow that down, that traffic down, especially as it's approaching the residential interfaces, if you will, for that road. We can neck it down. We can kind of make the roadway not quite as direct, and we can influence it with striping and other various things. So we definitely can take that on as a tasker to take a look in more detail on that, to verify the actual conditions versus what's being driven, and then see if there's any ways, especially at the interfaces with the residential streets, that we can slow that traffic down and make it more comfortable for all the people, whether they be drivers, pedestrians, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was, Joe, there was a speed assessment of the area, and it was reported out on April 22nd, and it said that there was a low need for enforcement because the posted speed is 40 miles per hour.
Right.
The average speed is 40 miles per hour, and 9,200 vehicles were assessed. So there was a, I guess that would be a speed study. probably?
Yes,
It did-
ma'am. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am. And what that is doing is that was giving us the raw data as what the speed was being on that road. And the assessment was based on the speed limit that was assigned to that road. So kind of the macro assessment of that was that there wasn't a conflict there with respect to the design of the road, et cetera. But that study, I would suggest, probably did not take into consideration or evaluate specifically the inflection points with the different residential roads that transition onto or off of 112th. And we can look at that in more detail.
oh, that would be good, Joe. All right, thanks. If you would take a second look at it, I would really appreciate it. And I know that there's some residents in the area who would too. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brink?
Mayor, members of the city council, I just wanted to add one thing, that section of 112th, it was one of the segments that was identified in the 10 locations that we had approved for radar speed signs. And that sign will be going up facing the eastbound traffic once they're delivered and we have the contractor on board to do the work.
Thank you. That should be helpful also.
Any other questions or comments regarding this presentation? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Sutherland, Mr. Brink, for your time this evening. We will move on to the next presentation of the evening, which is council policy updates concerning social media policy. Will Robert Sheasley, our city attorney, please make the presentation?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is round 2 of recommended policies from the policy committee, and it's one you've largely seen before. Last year, we went through this social media policy in essentially the same draft with some minor additions here. And so we will not go through it in the greatest of detail unless you like it, would like to do so. So Dylan, if we could have the presentation. The policy is detailed, and I've done my best to get it down into 10 slides. The full policy is in the packet, however. And as you all know, social media as an official council member comes with a lot of pitfalls. And the way this policy has sought to address those pitfalls is by making each council member responsible for their use of social media, giving guidelines so that council members can know what is private use versus public use, and recommending very strongly having separate accounts. And then establishing standards for use and the expectations for staff as well, and for council members. With that, the standards not only protect the rights of the public, it gives them clear guidance about what is or is not acceptable on official city pages, and that will protect council members and the city as well. Next slide, please. And so the real dividing line that we learned when we had the outside presenter last year in February, I believe, on social media, was that the very gray line as to whether you're using social media in your personal or your official capacity is going to be the boundary that you have to navigate. And a court would have trouble looking at, and is going to look at the totality of the circumstances of your social media use, and in particular, the post that may or may not be in question, or the comment or the action. And so the way the policy treats this is saying, if all of your social media is subject to the policy, if it is purely personal use, it's not subject to the policy. It's kind of backwards, but that's the way we have to treat it, because you can make a personal account into an official account based on how you use it. And so we have tried to put some guidelines in there to make sure you maintain a separate and distinct character. You don't use your city email address, you don't use your position, your title, or say you're talking as a city representative, you're not excessively discussing business or affairs of the city. I recommend you avoid that entirely, because excessive is going to be in the eye of the beholder, which could be your peers on council, it could be a judge, it could be a jury. And so avoiding that where at all possible is very important. Next slide, please. This is the first of many slides labeled standards for your use. And this is a mix of your general concepts and some legal issues. On your official capacity, on your official social media, recommend that your page or account identify that it's your official account. The council policy expresses an expectation that council members will be accurate in the representations they make. There won't be misrepresentations or speculation because your council official account is intended to support the work of the city council. The purpose of your use, as expected by council, is to improve discourse in the city and among council and the understanding of the community and the council of what's going on. There are a number of prohibitions that I hope would be second nature: ethnic slurs, profanity, personal insults, which mirrors a lot of how your council meeting policies already work. There's also a restriction on posting restricted content, which we'll get into on the next page because it's 2 columns of bullet points. Confidential information, personal information. You don't want to get into perceptions of doxing anyone and revealing personal information or violating any laws that may relate to that. And then intellectual property of other people. Next slide, please. So restricted content is largely a lot of what we talked about, but it goes down into much more detail here. Obviously, discriminatory, actual discriminatory, against the law discriminatory language, degrading or obscene language, anything defamatory or libelous, which is, again, because it's First Amendment based, it's kind of a gray area. So if you're going to be demeaning anybody on your official webpage or saying false things potentially about somebody else, that is something you want to stay away from because of the potential for you to be sued for defamation. Anything of a sexual nature, commenting or discussing on our legal activity or any investigations that are ongoing in the city to preserve the integrity of those investigations. Harassing statements, soliciting commerce. You shouldn't be using your official position to sell anything from your Etsy store. And I don't know if anybody has an Etsy account, so that's not pointed at anybody. Encouraging illegal activity, confidential information, common sense. If it's going to put safety and security of the public or our public systems at risk, you shouldn't post it. You obviously can't use official campaign or official sites for campaign purposes or any ballot questions unless it's the official city council position there. And then threatening comments. Next slide, please. We'll get halfway through our standards here. This mirrors your council policy already about stating your position, which is personal, as the position of the city councilor of city policy. So it has an encouragement to use a disclaimer saying that this is my personal opinion even as a council member. It's not the opinion of the city council. Just put what you would say if you're testifying somewhere or speaking to the media on something controversial, that you're not representing the position of the city council. It's important to understand that there's no expectation of privacy for your official accounts or any posts that you make thereon. And there is a lengthy terms of use document that we have created, and it's a very similar or identical to the one that the city social media policy would use. And that would govern not only how you use the page, but how the public interacts with the page. And especially how, if you have something inappropriate being posted on your page, how you deal with it. And that would be included on your account, linked from an account, put in your comments, however you do it. It just has to be available to the users so they know the restrictions. Next slide, please. Anytime you hear about First Amendment from a government perspective, you'll hear a strong restriction on viewpoint discrimination. We cannot, on your official accounts, have you restricting somebody's ability to view a post or post comments based on the viewpoint that they're expressing, whether they're for something, whether they're against something. Even hiding anything from the public could be construed to be problematic. So unless you're making it applicable to everybody, you can't block comments or stop comments. If you make commenting available to anybody, it needs to be available to all unless they violate the terms of use. And then you shouldn't be blocking particular people from seeing your account. One of the things, this was, I believe, the only thing that the policy committee added was prohibition on blocking or restricting people in essentially a discriminatory way. If you're not allowing everybody, and perhaps Councilmember Noble, if later, if you want to explain this one any further, if you are a moderator of a group that is exclusive based on something like your address, as Nextdoor is, you could not block or restrict somebody unless you make that same restriction applicable to everybody. And then deleting posts or comments is an issue. And you want to avoid doing that unless they violate the terms of use. The policy requires you to confer with me or someone in my office first to say it's okay. And then we preserve the post and notify the poster so that they are aware of what went wrong and what happened. We want to make sure that we don't get into the trouble that some other elected officials across the state and country have gotten into. And the final standards slide next, please. Obviously, we comply with the open meetings law. The discussion of many council members on a text on a thread online would be problematic, I believe, of public business. If you're all posting about it separately and seeing your posts, it gets into this weird hypothetical situation that the law doesn't address and I'm not particularly concerned about. But if you're all commenting on the same thread, that would be problematic. Obviously, if you have a quasi judicial matter coming before you, typically a land use case, excuse me, it recommends that you limit your interaction with that. You don't respond to posts or participate in those discussions. And then obviously deleting posts and messages is problematic due to the municipal record retention schedule that would apply. And then the final slide, Dylan, please, here, is about staff support. As I noted earlier, your social media would be an individual responsibility with staff support limited to developing and providing generic content for everybody to use. I believe that was a council request previously. Assisting with graphic design and branding standards. If staff was able to have access to an account, they could post generic content to your official account, so you wouldn't have to, perhaps. Obviously, legal advice from my office, and then any other support authorized by council. I know there had previously been a request to discuss budgeting or something in more detail. That was, I believe, disrupted by COVID, and the policy committee didn't want to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, wait for that to forward this policy on for council consideration. So I know that's a lot of information. I'm happy to go through any parts of it or take recommended changes from the group.
Questions or comments from council? Councilmember Noble.
I guess I better say something since Robert suggested that I should. This is about the Nextdoor thing, and I am a moderator on there, and I believe that Mayor Huseman is a moderator also. So it was just a question, because on a daily basis, you are notified of folks on Nextdoor who believe that they are witnessing a violation, and then the people who are moderators vote on that violation. And so it was something that concerned me. And and there are strict rules, Robert. So if it's a violation, it's a violation, I guess. But at the same time, I thought, well, that's a pretty odd thing for a council member to be doing, is voting on someone. I think another council member was a moderator at one point on Nextdoor as well. So that's my question. It was question more than a rule, really.
Thank you for that. It reminded me of where that developed from, and the language that we specifically put in is on page 4 of the policy, and we developed in the committee, was to say where you're using an account to moderate or lead an exclusive group, the council member that controls that account won't block or restrict access to individuals or groups from that group unless it applies to all members of the public, or restricting posting abilities or deleting of posts or comments where it involves public business, or have somebody else do that on their behalf. The concern, I believe, was that there were claims at one point that various posts were being, as Councilmember Noble noted, were being deleted with support or on behalf of moderators. So that just explicitly was put in there, which should benefit everybody and quell the concern that it would be happening perhaps. So.
Or
Councilmember Hurst.
allowed, that they're allowed. So it's both that they were deleted or that they were allowed. Nextdoor is one of the most confusing social media tools there is, actually.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, actually, I agree with Councilwoman Noble. I think I was a moderator for a while. I think what made me feel a little bitter about that was that there was several people voting, but not always. I think you guys will probably see that too, that there's only maybe 2 or 3 voting at times. And so your vote could be pretty impactful, but I hear you. And I think Councilwoman Noble, none of us ever represented ourselves as a council person there. It was more like representing ourselves individually. So I had less of it, personally, I thought about exactly what you're talking about several times, even before I quit when I was doing it. And I thought, as long as you don't represent yourself in that capacity as a moderator / council person, that it'd probably be okay. But when you start attaching the two, then it does get a little iffy for me as well. But personally have no issue with anybody who wants to be a moderator and those things to continue to do so. People complain and turn each other in so much. I didn't have time to keep up with it anymore. And I felt like I was being detrimental to the process. So I quit.
I think your sentiments pretty much wrap it up. I get tired of the emails that come in every single time if somebody thinks this is offensive or that is offensive. I quit voting on all that stuff altogether. And Councilmember Noble, whenever I made you a moderator, I even said that it's annoying how many emails you get on that. Not something that I even want to participate in. There's some good things in this policy update, but as a whole, I can't support it. And one of the biggest things, we keep throwing out this term official account. None of us have official Facebook accounts. An official Facebook account would be paid for by the city, funded by the city, and operated by the city, or would be along that function. You look at the governor's Facebook account, you look at, other elected officials, their Facebook accounts that are basically funded by the government entity that they belong to. We talk about protecting the First Amendment rights of the residents and making sure that they can post, but then we want to infringe on our own personal First Amendment rights. And I just take issue with that. And, if you want to have an official account and you want to put policies on what an official account will say, will do, or will not do, then it needs to be funded. It needs to be a budget position, and it needs to be a function of the city to operate those things. But as long as it is a single member who is taking time out of their time, out of their schedule, who is taking time out of their resources in order to operate a Facebook page or engage with residents or whatever, then that's their First Amendment right to do so. And so I can't support anything that is going to infringe on somebody's First Amendment rights to post whatever they want to. And, it's just like anything else with the First Amendment. There are consequences to what you say. There are consequences to what you do. We've seen people who have lost, TV shows. We've seen people who have lost, jobs, seen people who have lost positions in professional sports because of their exercising of the First Amendment right. But that's a decision that they make. But again, it is not for us to infringe on any elected person in this city or beyond First Amendment rights to do whatever they want. And so as a whole, I can't support these changes to the council policy. I think there are some good things that are in there. I think there are some things that just go way beyond what the responsibility of the city council is, and can't support it as a whole. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we will move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Mr.
Mayor
Sheed.
Huseman, may I? Yeah, thank you. I just want to offer, you raised some good points. I don't know from a legal perspective, that we're violating council's First Amendment rights. It is certainly not without limits to do anything you want, but I get your drift generally. One of the purposes of the policy is to protect the city from liability here. And so an option with this is to not have such a robust policy, but remove the city council, any council member using social media from the protection of the city, and essentially say the city won't be liable for your actions in social media, whether it be something you post or an action you take that could violate a law or another individual's rights. And so those are options there. I want to make sure I have the consensus enough of the group to go forward with putting this on an agenda. And I don't, if you want to move on, that's fine, but I want to make sure I know where we're going from here.
So anybody, Councilmember Wadiola?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I would like to, if you could give us more detail on which parts people don't agree on, so we could go back to the drawing board as a policy committee and take the feedback, because that was the whole point of bringing it to a study session, so we could get feedback from all our peers and just go back. I mean, this is not set in stone. We want your guys' feedback, and I think you bring up some good points, Mayor. So I would love to see what parts, so we could go back and everybody else and go back and see if we could fix the policy, or not fix it, but get a policy where it can pass with council, with the guidance of Mr. Sheasley.
Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally in agreement with this policy, but I'm also coming from the perspective where I'm not a huge presence on social media, and but I do have separate accounts for my council page versus my personal page, and so I don't see the problem. I do understand what you're saying is we create these personal and council pages on our own, and we're not delivering it to the same audience as that's an audience for the city page, for example. So there is that kind of conundrum, but in general, I think the intent of this is good. We've all been on council for a while and seen how social media can really divide council. It can cause a lot of backlash and fallout, and I think it is something that we have to be careful on how we use it, and it's not easy to really make kind of bright line rules surrounding this, because there are some opinions that are our own, and if they're different than the rest of council, then we do have that First Amendment right. But I think the question becomes, how are you conveying that? Are you conveying that as a council person on your council page, or are you doing it of your own volition? And how are you using your personal page? Because the group pages for the council pages, they work a lot differently. People have to opt in, follow you, like you, in order to be able to see and participate in those pages, where your personal page is a little bit more open and gets a greater audience. So I think a lot of times that line gets blurred, where we put things on our personal page as our personal opinion, but we're really speaking from a council perspective, because we reach more people that way. So I think this kind of helps clarify that, or maybe we need to work on setting those parameters, so there is a clear kind of expression of, this is the council page, and then this is your personal page. But once you start blurring that line, then but where is that? And I think that's kind of where we have to get to with this, and I don't know if we're quite there yet.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I see both sides to the argument. I think good points have been made on both sides. I really start to think about particular times in the kind of political cycle, if you will, or when this could become a conflict. You know, say I'm running for re-election. I guess that's the best situation since you're already on council at that point. Quite honestly, everybody during an election makes some pretty bold statements, if you will, that don't represent everybody else on council in most cases. And so where, you know, your constituents that you're already serving want to know why they should re-elect you. And if you're having those discussions on your city council page, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad thing, because you're being open, honest, and transparent in that situation, as long as you're not blocking people from those conversations. But on the other hand, I understand that an egregious action taken on social media could be a reflection to everybody, you know, sitting here on this meeting. And so, you know, again, I think all of these policies that we're working towards are self-imposed, right? And they are going to be self-policed, if you will. And what I mean by that is that if I go and make an egregious statement on on my city, you know, Councilman Hurst page or whatnot, you guys would hold me accountable, and that's the only people that would hold me accountable. And so I think we have to define kind of a best practices at the very least, and I'm not opposed to that. I think there's just some scenarios that may not come up often, but we need to consider those when we're making the holistic policies that we're going to hold each other accountable to, because it can get us all into a sticky situation that we don't. You know, they only get heightened. Those situations only get heightened during election time or re-elections and things like that, and it goes against the spirit, I think, of what we're trying to do. But I enjoy that. I mean, I subscribe to this spirit, right? Like we're a team. We don't want to get on and post anything that's not factual. You know, that would be my biggest thing is, if you're just repeating what was said or what you already said in meeting, I mean, no big deal. Even if it was abrasive or bold or whatever the case may be, that's already on public record. Repeating that's not a big deal for me. But, you know, being silent on an issue and then berating everybody afterwards is not what we're all looking for. I think that's kind of the spirit of this. It's just making sure that we're all consistent. That would be my biggest concern, is just trying to set that expectation. If it's broken, then we kind of have this type of policy to talk about what we can do from there. But again, this isn't something that all of a sudden you don't get to be a city council person anymore if you violate this. You know, this is something that we have to hold each other accountable to, and just keep a policy of how we would do that. So with that being said, you know, I think there are some things that we can clarify to make sure that we still kind of hold our individual freedoms as humans, while we're simultaneously council people, by having a limitation, so we're not kind of dragging everybody down with us in certain scenarios.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. You know, like I said, my objection comes from the standpoint that there is no such thing as an official account. You know, none of us have official Facebook pages. You know, we have personal Facebook pages that we have dedicated. For a lot of people, they started as campaign pages and then transitioned into, hey, I was elected, so I'm just going to continue to use that page, but it's still a personal page. And I just believe that if you're going to limit what is said on somebody's personal Facebook page, whether it be because they hold a political office, or it be because they have a business going, or because, you know, they like to post jokes or whatever it is, that's their personal right to do so. If you want to start limiting that, then you need to start investing money, and you need to have it a budgetary thing to where the city is maintaining Facebook pages for each of those members, and there are approved posts that gets put out there that basically meets the standards that are established by a social media policy for the city, if that's the way you want to go. I personally don't think that that's the way that anybody wants to see it go, but I object to any infringement upon any of our rights, any of our constitutional rights that are, you know, guaranteed upon us. that were given to us. So that's just, again, that's my opinion, but there are 9 of you, and 8 others of you in order to be able to make your own choices as well. And what the majority votes in is what we abide by. Councilmember Guardiola.
Appreciate your opinion, Mayor, and we'll go back to the committee and with Mr. Sheasley and get your guys' feedback, and then start working on it and bring it back at a later date.
Thank you all for the feedback.
Any other comments or questions? No, thank you very much, Mr. Sheasley, for your presentation. Thank you to the committee who is working tirelessly to try to get our policies and procedures updated from whenever they were initially implemented. Your work is appreciated. Next presentation is going to be on street racing. Would like to invite Rob McCoy, Commander of the Special Operations, to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. Thank you for letting me speak with you this evening. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. As you all know, street racing is a problem throughout the Denver metro area. Basically, from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins every weekend and sometimes during the week. These issues continue to plague our community. If we think of some of the bigger ones that have kind of drawn our attention, the one on March 7th in Aurora, where they basically shut down all of I-225. Aurora PD had a heck of a time trying to control that issue. So that really kind of brought this to light. We knew there was a problem, but that kind of just was a bold move that they did that day. On April 3rd, downtown Denver, there was another speed racing event that resulted in a fatality, but it was also in the media. And as you know, it's in the media a lot. Fox 31 reports that street racing has more than tripled since the pandemic. And I'm sure that you're all aware, and you probably get calls from your constituents about some of the things that are going on in the community. Commerce City is not immune to it. Our experiences are a little bit different than what you see on a video game or a movie, or even the events on 225 in Aurora. Ours are a little bit different, but as you know, we have large car clubs and things that gather in the city where they race to and from and leave, cause loud noise and potentially dangerous situations. So we are not immune to it. Next slide, please. This truly is a quality of life issue that affects everybody in the community. Pioneer Park, Monaco Park, and 8100 block and 8300 block of Tower Road are our typical places where we have car clubs gather. Just last week, we had about 200 cars show up at Monaco Park. So we recognize that this is a problem, and we are making some steps to try to address it. Next slide, please. This is just a couple of maps of the parks. As you know, Pioneer Park has a lot of parking, which is ideal for the street racer groups and car clubs to try to go and meet. Next slide, please. As opposed to Monaco Park. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Monaco Park, there's very little parking. So Magnolia Street, basically from 56th up to 58th, there's very little parking. It's a huge community concern with our neighbors there. And that's where we had roughly 200 cars the other night. Next slide, please. The 81st and Tower issues are a little bit different. We don't get as many complaints, but this is where we probably have more racing, is up and down Tower Road on 81st Avenue and 83rd Avenue. A lot of the groups like to gather in the parking lots and show off their cars, and then they leave. We don't typically have a lot of, shutting down roadways and, dangerous high-speed races. But as I'm sure you can imagine, when they're leaving those areas, they do travel at high rates of speed up and down roadways to where they're going to actually do some of their more racing. Next slide, please. So over a 3-year period, we had 124 calls for service related to street racing. Not just racing, again, shutting down a roadway and speeding in a competitive sort of race, but calls for service from the community about racing, cars racing up and down the street, cars racing up and down parking lots and so forth. So there's basically 3 areas. One was racing, one was cars gathering before, during, or after racing, and then noise complaints as a result of the racing or gathering and revving their engines, loud music, squealing of tires, etc. These complaints were not speeding complaints. If we were to include speeding complaints, I'm sure, as you can imagine, it would be well above 124 over a 3-year period. So next slide, please. The challenge that we encounter as a police department is literally the numbers of cars that show up at these events. When we have our manpower on the street and 200 or more cars show up at a particular location, it's very difficult for us to do enforcement with any sort of impact. When we do try to stop some of these vehicles as they're driving away, they're well aware that we won't chase them for something minor. So many times they don't stop. So it's difficult for us to identify those people and hold them accountable for their actions. But we'll get to some ideas of how we might be able to address those here in a minute. One of the biggest challenges is social media. You guys were already talking about social media tonight. As you know, it's just a few keystrokes and they can get a message to 200 people just like that. And so if they want to meet at Pioneer Park and they're driving around the area, they can just send a message and here they come. So our poor district officers trying to figure out what they're going to do with all these cars as they're coming in. So it can be difficult. It really stretches our manpower and our resources very quickly. We can have a nice crowd, which we did the other night. The 200 people that are at Monaco Park, they were very cordial, very cooperative with the police, told us exactly how long they're going to be there, and then they left without causing too much problems. But sometimes it does get a little bit out of hand. One of their tactics is they try to divert our attention. They make a false call for service somewhere that we have no choice but to respond to. Say, for example, they're in Pioneer Park and we're trying to limit their access to the park just because there's so many cars in there. And then they'll call, divert us somewhere else where we have to go, and then everybody kind of comes flying in there. So it is their goal to overwhelm the police when they're in those scenarios. Next slide, please. We've been working on this pretty hard for a significant amount of time, and I've had the honor of working with some people from throughout the metro area, Colorado State Patrol, and other agencies. We collect intelligence on this group, and we're able to kind of figure out where they're going to go ahead of time. We have a mutual aid agreement with Adams County and all our law enforcement partners in the area. We try to do enforcement when possible. On April 25th, we had a huge issue at the Pioneer Park where we were to issue multiple citations for various infractions. That was pretty effective. But there's always stuff that we need. They're unique and trying to figure out ways to out trick us. So we're trying to outsmart them. One of the resources that we have highly recommend, and I think we even have social media posts on it through the city, is that our community can report street racing at www.reportstreetracing.com. And that's been pretty successful in helping us figure out where these guys are going. So next slide, please. Next couple slides, when we were putting this together, was kind of trying to figure out what's the next steps, if we had any sort of ordinances that we could tweak or implement. There are quite a few current traffic laws and applicable ordinances that are already on the books. I won't bore you with reading these all, but there's a ton of things that we can charge people with through the state model traffic code. Next slide, please. There's also a lot of ordinances that we can charge, ranging from unreasonable noise, disorderly conduct, curfew in the parks, and some of these other newer ordinances related to parking in the parks that we're already addressing, things of that nature. Some of them do require a victim to prosecute, so somebody has to come forward and be willing to testify. Others we can charge them accordingly without a victim. Next slide, please. So in preparation for this, I met with city attorney staff and we came up with a few ideas. They're not finalized by any means, but a few of them are things that we took from other agencies. One is street racing and exhibition of speed prohibited as a city ordinance, which would require jail sentences and potentially fine increases. Again, this is a work in progress where we're going to have to work with the wording in the city attorney's office to make sure it's all legal and that sort of thing. So the other one is, I thought this one is most applicable for us, and is trespassing for the purposes of furtherance of street racing. So if we have a large group of people gathering in a park or in a private business, and they're starting to, squeal their tires, leaving at a high rate of speed, coming back, those sorts of things, we could potentially look at those. And one of the biggest ones was 3-2304, which was penalties, and that was to increase the penalty if they were to violate anything related to street racing. Next slide, please. Some of the future efforts, we're going to continue with our ongoing mutual aid operations. This has been very successful. We did an operation, I believe, April 18th, where we had basically 100 officers throughout the Denver metro area that we were involved with, where we basically chased them around not literally, but followed them around the metro area trying to quell their activities. And working with this work group, we'll formalize the investigatory process and partner with them to potentially charge more severely into state court, potentially even civil actions against those groups. One of the neater things for this group is to educate the street racing community. One of the things Colorado State Patrol and other agencies are doing is working with Bandimere Speedway and actually allowing some of these cars to go and race legally where it's safe and in controlled environment, as opposed to on our streets where everybody could be put in danger. There's a lot of technology out there. I won't bore you with all this stuff, but one of the things is a plate reader where we can actually figure out who the registered owner is on some of these vehicles, and then do some follow-up and have conversations and potentially even charge them if we can identify them doing some illegal activities. And as you know, one of the biggest things is enlisting community support for reporting and deterrence. We have been successful with our social media program and getting some cooperation from parents and things of that nature. So we will continue with that. And then sometimes you have to get down and just figure out what's going on in the group, because we can't see everything. So utilize undercover investigators to help identify it and help build criminal cases and hold the real problem accountable. So, next slide, please. And then just kind of brainstorming some of the other ideas is to potentially physically close Pioneer Park after hours. An idea was to put some sort of arms on the entrances to avoid people coming in there and meeting after hours. Another was to put signage on closed roadways with signage that says, for example, Magnolia Street is closed through traffic unless you live in the neighborhood during these particular hours, which would allow us to have additional enforcement tool if they're just continually traveling up and down that street. Kind of like in the old days when people used to cruise Colfax or cruise the Westminster Mall or something like that. Next slide, please. We also made some recommendations recently to the budget for a covert automatic plate reader. We also, I think council's aware of the Live View mobile trailer surveillance system that's, we're attempting to get some contracts going with that. And then again, the after hours solar powered gates, that was another consideration. And I think that is it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those.
Questions or comments from council staff? Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I don't have a particular question. I just want to say thank you for addressing this. It's something that I had asked the chief about a month or two ago. And really my question to him came from the incident on 225 and then the subsequent changes to ordinances in Aurora. And I want to make sure that as other communities regionally crack down on street racing, that we don't become the recipients of the overflow. And so I like your presentation. I think there's a lot of good suggestions in there, and I look forward to seeing some of these budget requests come to us. I'd love to see the plate reader in action, as well as some of the other ideas. So thank you. Thank you for this.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation as well. I was just curious too, can you explain what is a ALPR unit? What is that?
So that's the automatic license plate reader, where a camera will take a photograph of the license plate, and then we can get a registered owner, determine if there's any wants or warrants for that vehicle, if it's a stolen vehicle or whatever the case may be.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then my constituents called to report street racing, and they complain that nothing happens. And since I've been on city council 18 months, I hear there's not enough staff. So do you feel like we need more staff still, or does the Commerce City Police Department maybe need help outside from the police department?
Well, I would defer to my boss for that one, ma'am. But I think we could always use more resources. But Aurora Police Department has an 800 to 1,000 man police department, and they were overwhelmed very quickly as well. So sometimes throwing manpower resources may not be the answer. I think sometimes technology and working together and using some sort of tactics with our partners, where we can all help each other out. Because again, it's a community problem throughout the Denver metro area. Really, it is. I mean, if you open your windows at night, I imagine anywhere in the Denver metro area, you're going to hear, cars accelerating and squealing their tires. I know in my neighborhood I do. So, yeah.
All right, thanks. And then, so if you're not physically stopping them from drag racing, when they take off, I mean, is there other ways we can combat the problem? Since they're not being stopped, because it's like
we can, if there's 200 people, we can only stop 5 or 6 at a time, and maybe double that. And then a lot of times they don't stop, they just take off on us, and then that becomes a problem because we can't identify who that person is, and sometimes they may not even have a plate or anything like that, so it's very difficult to identify them. That's why if we have undercovers in there, where maybe we can get some video of them and things of that nature. It's just different tactics to address it. And it's just difficult because you do get overwhelmed very quickly.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I don't know if the police department has looked into also possibly like increasing the fine levels like they do around the 4th of July. So I'm just throwing that out there as well. So thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much, Commander. That was very informative. One question. What is there a particular night or hours that you find the street racing is occurring?
That's the problem. We don't. It's usually if it's nice. Last night, we were expecting, we actually put some resources out with our mutual aid partners, expecting it to be relatively busy. And then the weather hit, and they're probably, maybe they stayed home to celebrate with their moms. They didn't come out. You know, it is very random. I think it's not just, you know, Friday, Saturday nights, it's Sunday nights. It can be a Tuesday night. You know, so, and then the hours, I mean, it could start as early as, you know, 4 o'clock on a Sunday, and they could wrap it up in Commerce City at 3 in the morning. So, you know, it's difficult. And that's why we have some of our intelligence to be able to figure that sort of thing out and try to head them off at the pass a little bit.
Right, because I was also thinking of diversionary events at both parks. But if we never know when it's going to happen, then I guess you can't actually have an event going on every single night at the parks in order to prevent them from using the area for street racing. But it was a hope. It was a hope that we could do something like that. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I just, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing y'all bring some stuff so we could up the fines and the consequences. I think making an example of a couple folks, I see them all over social media. Aurora's taking cars or you know, and I agree, you know, manpower doesn't always affect it, but I think the little wins we could get of having stricter consequences for these racers, because it's affecting everywhere. And you're right. I live up in the Northern Range, and I hear on Highway 85 at all hours of the time. And so I would like to see how we could up the consequences or the fines, and really make a statement to those folks. You might get 3 or 4 because they will go, like you said, sir. But those 3 or 4 are gonna feel it, and that word will also travel through the grapevine and social media that Commerce City's not, because this is dangerous. And you know, I think we've been a little bit lucky that we haven't had something really crazy's happened. And I mean, we've had our incidents, but we don't want. So I would like to see how we could do that, how this council that's seated could really prove stuff like that and go through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, you answered one of my questions when you answered Councilmember Noble's about, you know, using analytics and trying to predict where and when they're going to be. Because, you know, I grew up in the cruise culture on Federal, and we'd be there on Sunday nights, and, you know, we'd be cruising the loop on around the Westminster Mall on Fridays and Saturdays. And, you know, and I know that there's still some similar things that go on here. Like Sunday nights is big for, you know, the highway racing, when they can get a little less traffic and they're able to shut down, you know, 225 and I-25, and you see it a lot. And I think for Commerce City, our roads are so bad that it's hard for them to actually race here because they might drop a transmission. But I think it's a perfect gathering place because we have, you know, a lot of, you know, warehouses and big parking lots where, you know, it can accommodate a lot of cars without calling a lot of attention. So I think that's where, you know, the problem lies here, and where we have to kind of get ahead of it, whether it's how you said, you know, with our intelligence and trying to predict where they're going to be before they're there. So, you know, I'm interested to see how you guys do with that, and if we're able to, you know, kind of schedule resources around those times that we're expecting these cars to be there. And I also think the education piece is going to be really important. You know, I've seen programs in other places that discourage street racing, and, you know, maybe teach kids some of these mechanical skills at the same time. But they also teach them how to go out to the tracks and how to do it the right way and what they need to do to be on the track and, pass, their safety inspections and everything else that goes with it. And, I think part of the problem is, kind of going back to like skateboarding, when I was growing up, it was, people were skating everywhere and, destroying property and waxing ledges and doing all this stuff. And it wasn't until we started building skate parks that people had places to go and that you really started seeing, these people that were skating get off of the streets and go more to the places that were designated for them to utilize. So I think there's a shortage of tracks. I mean, we only have Bandimere in this area, and it's a lot easier for people to gather, here, maybe somewhere that's closer to their home and do this legally. And so I think, part of it is we should start working on maybe a regional approach to try to get some more places that people can do this safely and encourage them to, get off the streets and do it in these controlled environments.
I agree.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to add, I do really like the idea with the solar paneled gates at Pioneer Park. And I hope, the mayor and other city council will support the police department, especially in that effort, and look into cost to get that up sooner than later. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you for making that suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you clarify for me? You made a mention of Bandimere and some of the clubs using Bandimere. Are those sponsored events? Are they things that the clubs are doing in conjunction with Bandimere, or how is that happening?
Well, the street racing work group and State Patrol has been working with them. I don't know the exact date when that's coming up, but it's an event where it's basically just that. If they can race against, and I think it's been going on for years. You can race against the police. We can bring out an Explorer and see how we do against one of their souped up cars. But it's just trying to say, hey, there is a safe way to do it. Kind of the social media thing, getting the word out there, like, hey, if you want to race, let's do it in this controlled environment. And Councilmember Madera was exactly right. There's just not enough. I mean, they want to do it more than just once every 3 or 4 months, right? I mean, they want to, if they're doing it every night, 3 or 4 months isn't going to quell it. But it is an option to kind of show them maybe how to do it safely in a controlled environment. So I think we support that, and we're going to be involved in that. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. That was my next question was, are we going to be involved? So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Oops, I apologize.
All right, well, thank you, Commander McCoy and Chief Nichols. Thank you very much for the presentation. Definitely like the idea of being able to close off Pioneer Park with some gates, and look forward to seeing a budget request for that, as well as the automatic camera trailer. I know there's one sitting at the King Supers over by Constellation on Martin Luther King there in Central Park. And I just think it's a fascinating piece of equipment with the elevated camera up in the sky, and look forward to seeing more technology like that being used in order to overcome some of the shortages that we have on manning that can basically augment and have eyes out there for you guys to use. So look forward to those budget requests coming forward so that we can get those tools in your hands so that you have everything that you need in order to be successful in combating that. So thank you again for your presentation, and we will move on next. I see we're already advancing through slides to the Adams County Home Investment Partnership Program Consortium. Would like to invite Cheryl Steinberg, CDBG Coordinator, to introduce the presentation.
Hello, Council. Good evening, and this is Cheryl, as the mayor mentioned, and I'm also here with Eric Chatham with Civitas LLC. He's one of our consultants. And sorry about the advancing slide there. what we're talking about today is joining the intergovernmental agreement to join the Adams County Home Consortium. And to answer what is the HOME program, it's basically a program designed to strengthen the partnerships between government and the private sector. So you get to expand the existing supply of affordable housing and expand new affordable housing as well. The Home Consortium then allows us to do this on a more local regional level, for example, a county. So the role of the consortium is local governments form them. So the existing consortium right now is Thornton, Westminster, and Adams County. Then they elect a leader, which is Adams County, and they assess affordable housing needs in the area. They develop a plan to address those needs. Then they get busy and they perform complex housing activities. And then all of this throughout the whole process is reported to HUD at different stages. So HOME it's a HUD program, and HUD gives an annual allotment to the consortium members, the jurisdictions. And right now, since we're not in a consortium, our portion, which is estimated to be about 150,000 a year, goes to the state. So we really don't see it coming back to us directly. What we can do though, is by joining the consortium, that money goes then over to Adams County and it accumulates there, and it's for us to use and for Adams County to match or to leverage if they choose, if they choose. So we get to address local low to moderate income housing needs. And this includes, like I mentioned, new development, but it's also ownership and rental assistance and rehabilitation of existing housing. Eligible expenses include soft and hard costs, rehabilitation, reconstruction, site improvements, land and rental and home buying assistance as well. And this is done in a 3-year membership cycle. Once we join the consortium, we're in it for 3 years. So what's required is right off the top from our portion, and also from Westminster's and Thornton's and Adams County, 10% administration goes to the leader of the consortium, which is Adams County. Another 20% goes to the local, to the CHODO allocations, if there's one in play. And that's a community housing development organization. Then we have our responsibility for each project we pursue would be a project match of 25% of non-federal funds. And this can be tax credit, land, donation, developer contributions, and so forth. And as I mentioned, the commitment to the consortium once we join us for 3 years. So we would be done with this one September 30th of 2025. And the contribution, we would need to contribute and adopt Adams County's consolidated plan. We would no longer be required to do our own. We would simply contribute to Adams County, which would have a portion for us to add to, and then they submit it to HUD. The Adams County Consortium, Thornton, which is again, Thornton, Westminster, and the county, will move their program years over to our program years, which starts October 1. Adams County then prepares all the documents and reports and accounting necessary. Projects are selected by the city in cooperation with the consortium. And those are usually typically based on their readiness or timing of the project and the overall benefits to the community. And the city, if they join, would start October 1st of next year, so 2022. And at that point, at the end of the 3-year commitment, we can opt out if we choose. Home Consortium benefits, it's going to help us meet our affordable housing needs here in the city. It captures the city's housing funding that normally would be going to the state and brings it here to the city. It gives us over, long-term savings on the consolidated plan. And for example, this consolidated plan we're currently in is a $40,000 plan. So it would save roughly that every 5 years. Then there's the benefit of regional collaboration to produce a larger scale, low to moderate income housing developments. And then historically, Adams County contributes to their home funding to their consortium partners to do these larger scale developments. There are some drawbacks. The leader of the consortium, Adams County, gets the administrative funding. There'll be none coming to the city, but they do the lion's share of the administration, and ours is limited. We have limited administrative requirements, which I would be doing, I believe. And then Adams County's contributions are not necessarily guaranteed. But what they have done in the past, I wanted to show you a few examples. The Adams County Home Consortium projects have included the Crossing Point North project in Thornton. It's a 62-unit affordable housing apartment complex. And just to give you some numbers here, 324,380 came from Thornton, and from the county, $505,619. Another one was the Alto Apartments in Westminster. It's a 70-unit affordable housing apartment complex as well. And then a bigger one, 150 in affordable housing units, is the Baker School Apartments in Westminster. And Adams County contributed $160,000, and the Chodo for that project was $200,057. So I did want to point out, we had some recent minor changes sent to us by the county for the intergovernmental agreement. So when we go to next to council to adopt the resolution, if you choose to, it will contain the county's corrections, this basic capitalization, updating some contact information, and clarification of some basic terminology. So are there any questions for either Eric or I on the home program?
Councilmember Wadilla.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I think this is great. I think we haven't seen the worst of it after COVID for affordable housing, homelessness for our middle-class families. And something like this, if we could team up and do something like this, would be great for the city. So I would definitely support something like this. Thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
How often are these awards granted?
Every year. It's an annual award. And
So,
it's HUD allocated, so we really don't know the exact amount. The county is actually suggesting we would get more like 190,000, but I'm being more conservative.
okay, is it for each member of the consortium, or is it just one award per year?
Good question. Each member of the consortium gets their own formulated allocation by HUD. So since we're a little smaller, ours will be a little less than Thornton and Westminster's. Adams County gets a very large allocation. So it's going to change a little bit every year, but it's for each member of the consortium based on a formula.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Councilmember Noble.
I like the looks of this. Thank you so much. Certainly a building costs a lot more than 600,000 for some of these units. So are these projects that are done with the developer and then we're making a contribution and the county is making a contribution? Is that how it works?
Classically, yes, that is. It can be, local affordable housing developers, national ones as well. It can be Habitat and those kind of programs as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This is definitely not something I have any expertise in. So if you wouldn't mind me asking, when we talk about affordable housing, sometimes the definition of affordable is different for everybody. And so, I've heard it called attainable housing. What are the standards that kind of accompany this type of program? And that's what I mean. I have no expertise. So what that really means. Obviously, affordable housing and the program in and of itself sound really good. I was just trying to hopefully understand what type of details come with that, because if affordable housing goes from $2,500 rent to $2,200 rent, I really don't know what I don't know what that means, and I'm really just trying to make sure I understand the impacts of this and what that could mean for our community.
Right. And for example, in the samples I showed you, they rent to families who are 30 to 60% AMI, or area median income. So let's see, I think I have a chart right here. Yep. Okay, so for example, a family of 4 at 30% AMI would make $31,450. And at 50%, I don't have the 60% calculation, but it's $52,400 for a family of 4. For a single person, the 30% would be $22,050. And for a single person at 50% is $36,700. And these are the latest figures from HUD that we base our low to moderate income figures off of every year. They change them every year. And it's project to project. We would fit with what the developer needs and what we want. So, because it's the city passes the resolution to pursue these projects.
I appreciate that explanation. And that's all I was looking for. I realized that it was going to be impactful. I just wanted to make sure I understood, how impactful it could be. And I think that's a really good metric to follow right there.
And let me also defer to Eric on that one. Did you have any additional comments on that?
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Cheryl. I could also share with you, council member, that HUD also publishes not only income limits, but rent limits for rental housing that's assisted through this home program. As an example, a 3-bedroom rent limit in the Denver metro area for households at 50% AMI would be $1,362 for a 3-bedroom. Excuse me, for households earning that 60% AMI that Cheryl mentioned, the income or the rent limit would be $1,737. And that actually includes utilities. So if you factor out a few $100s a month for utilities from each of those, you're really looking at between $1,000 and $1,400 for a 3-bedroom apartment would be the limits. So that's some of your targeting. Again, HUD publishes both income and rent limits for these projects for the Denver metro area and for all areas around the country, of course, but specifically for the Denver metro. So our developers would have to follow those guidelines annually.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. Cheryl, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Jason, but given our reliance on metro districts, is there anything that we need to change in service plans or ordinances or building code or whatever the case might be that would encourage affordable housing? Because we have this PUD sort of bucket thing right now. And I would surely like to be able to use affordable housing, but I don't believe that we have any requirements regarding affordable housing in Commerce City.
And that is a question I would refer to Jason. Just so you know, the Adams County does have an analysis of impediments to housing. And they just adopted it and sent it to HUD, and it was approved just last month. So that is something I can provide to council. It's a really interesting information that they put together with a local consultant asking all sorts of questions on homelessness to housing and impediments to those, to improving those things.
Thank you, Cheryl. Councilmember Noble. That is a great question, and I will be honest with you, it is a very difficult and complex question to answer. I will share with you from experience, affordable housing, attainable housing is a very competitive market because it's a very niche market as it relates to who operates within that. When you think about it with respect to certain yield points as it relates to return and being able to provide those products, I would say it's more about the ability to underwrite and to fund and to incentivize those projects to enter into an emerging market. And I would call Commerce City an emerging market for affordable housing. We have, I would say, flexible regulations. We have incentive zoning as it is, right, with the type of building design, the type of densification in order to support, but it really comes down at the end of the day, how do you incentivize the brick and mortar vertical construction around those developments? If you look at some of the most recent developments, just not here in Commerce City, but just in the Denver metro region, right, there's some level of public participation from a funding source to help with underwriting on top of institutional capital being your Wells Fargo, your Chase Bank, you name it, because all of them are playing a significant part to help for those developments. So I don't think it's one size fits all or one answer is going to address it, quite frankly. I think with what we've been trying to do, and I think the home program is just one component or one piece of the puzzle to the bigger picture. Always looking at our regulations, looking at how we incentivize both through efficient review of our land development process, of the requirements that we have, how we look at, like I said, the public participation from a funding perspective. I think also at the same time, how do we continue to support from that higher vision, the comp plan being one of the biggest ones about what goals and that we are setting targets towards that attainable and affordable housing. And how do we balance that affordable housing, not in the sense of it being separate and apart, but being a part of the broader community, the connected community, right? How do you tie it with market rate development to which you start to have a blended community that helps to support and once again to continue to rise all levels of the market. So like I said, it's a very complex, I'll say, interest that we have. And like I said, there's no easy answer, but it's having to be broad brush in our approach and our thought process to it.
What about a percentage of units in a complex, for example, like 3 units out of 300 or something, that there would be affordable units in a building? And also having a requirement in large projects, large development projects in the service plan, because there needs to be some sort of benefit for Commerce City for the service plan over and beyond putting in streets.
Yeah. So allow me to share this with you, council member. I think what you're speaking about is inclusionary zoning, and inclusionary zoning is requiring through either regulation or standard to have new development that is market rate, to have a percentage of it to meet a certain AMI of the community. I would say inclusionary zoning, even while it's been in effect, and I would say since my professional career for the last 18 plus years, is still a ever evolving, and I'll say right sizing to find the appropriate, I'll say point of emphasis. Inclusionary zoning requires a lot of due diligent review, introspective kind of questioning and feedback with the community. And at the same time, you have to go back and debrief yourself to see, did you actually achieve the goal that you set forth to do? I don't believe it's something that we have most recently done. And it's something that obviously we could do. We just have not gone down that path as the next step of, as opposed to incentivizing to requiring, because that requirement can take up to a number of years to work through all of the various gymnastics from policy, legal ramifications, and other things associated with that. So there's a lot of complexity around inclusionary zoning. As a rate,
Yeah.
to your second question about service plans, what you will find with most affordable development projects is that they're seeking a special limited partnership, which is an abatement of property taxes to help underwrite their land basis for a project. So kind of take the price of the land down, help underwrite to be able to bridge a gap. So when you're doing such, you're removing any of that tax incentivization, or you're creating a tax incentivization for that property. Therefore, thinking about the mills that would be created, then a metro district doesn't necessarily benefit from that. So what you find with affordable projects is that they're few and far between by actually creating a metro district to help support public improvements in and around or within the development. Part of that's going to be captured within, typically for a funding source to help bridge either 90% or 30% of a project is a 4% or a 9% LIHTC, which is low income housing tax credit from the federal government, which is issued and offered through here, the Colorado Housing Finance Authority. So in that, a lot of those offsites and onsites are being captured through their funding sources. So hence not the need for a metro district to support their project.
And if I may, the home program, joining the home consortium gives us another tool in our tool belt to alleviate some of those impediments and to help us compete in the market to incentivize developers to come to Commerce City.
But if we don't have land available in order to do it, then that's a problem. I mean, I remember as a civilian attending a city council meeting and how upset the neighbors were in a metro district about an apartment complex that came in that didn't have to participate in the metro district because it fell under a particular law that excluded it since it was a nonprofit. You know, that I suppose is one way, but it seems to me that we need to take the initiative as a city, and rather than saying we don't know how it can be done or if it's going to take too long or whether we shouldn't do it, is that we need to figure out how we're going to do it in order to make it possible for residents to remain living here and for their residents' children to be able to live here as well. Because home prices, just as they are everywhere, are getting quite expensive in Commerce City, and we're becoming less and less affordable as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, would like to thank you this evening for your time, ma'am. I think the presentation was great and look forward to seeing us advance this as a topic of conversation for possible participation for the city. That concludes all of our reports, or excuse me, all of our presentations. We will move on to reports, starting with our city manager, Mr. Tinklenberg.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Bring up my report. Wanted to let you know that in regards to the hotel development over in the Mahi Greyhound Park, we've contacted additional developers, and one developer has informed us that he no longer has an interest after initially looking at it. So we have one new developer and the existing one who remain interested in that site. On the 120th Avenue widening project, there was yet another meeting between staff and the developer regarding the project, and that was to try to resolve the sewer relocation issue. And that cost has ballooned to well over $1 million for dealing with that sewer relocation. So still working to try to get a better solution on that issue. Commerce Place, that's the Hammer property. We are continuing meetings with the developer regarding the annexation and also the design on 104th Avenue west of US 85. And then Triangle Logistics, staff met regarding the financing for the project. And I believe I reported before, it will require both TIF and the Metro District to be able to fund the different improvements. And that's because the Metro District cannot be used for environmental mitigation. Community development issues, land use cases have climbed to 189 cases. That compares to 155 last year. So again, the business is just continuing to increase. Another illustration of that in terms of inspections, 3,058 inspections were conducted in April, and that compares with 2,241 in 2020. So increase of nearly 1,000. Comprehensive plan, an email was sent to all of you asking if you want to serve as the DYI kit hosts. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. And then emergency rental assistance, approximately 145,000 has been obligated in the first month. So high demand for that program. ULI technical assistance, staff is working with the Urban Land Institute on a technical assistance panel for a fall discussion on catalyzing equitable development around the RTD station. So that's in preparation, in anticipation of the development that will be occurring in that area. One of which is for the also school site. Economic development, just a reminder again that the federal payroll protection program lending is still open until May 31. And then finance is still working with the outside auditors. That audit is still underway, and that should be wrapped up, if I recall correctly, by the end of the month. In terms of police matters, just a heads up that Denver is going to be conducting their testing of warning towers. And so depending on weather conditions, wind direction, you may hear their sirens go off on Wednesday, May 12th. So this coming Wednesday. And they'll be testing them for 3 minutes. In terms of public works issues, the 112th Avenue Bridge over the Fulton Canal. So that's just off of Brighton Road, east of Brighton Road. The Federal Highway Administration had granted approval for us to advertise for contracts for that project. However, there are migrating birds nesting under the bridge. And so the project has to wait until those migrating birds are done nesting, unfortunately. The Brighton Road Bridge over the Fulton Ditch. On that one, Xcel Energy has elected to bury the gas line currently hanging from the bridge. And so that's going to require coordination between Xcel and the ditch company. So that also will delay that project. In terms of green yard waste drop off this coming Saturday, so that's the 15th, A1 Organics is accepting green yard waste for free. And that's between 8 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. In terms of the MSC generator project, load studies are completed, and it resulted in us ordering a larger generator for the fleet building. That's the fleet maintenance building. And we expect delivery of those generators by the end of June. Now, prep work has started, or will start this coming week, but the actual generators won't be on site until later. And then in terms of the facility study that they're conducting, that project is going well. And the next step will be loading data regarding the existing buildings into the Cartograph software, and that will enhance our preventive maintenance program. So those are some of the highlights to report to you this week. Are there any questions?
Any questions regarding the city manager's report? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Appreciate all the information that you're sharing with us.
Thank you.
Next up is Mr. Sheasley, city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a very brief report tonight. If you wanted to submit administrative business items by tomorrow for next week's meeting, the form is not available yet, but I understand it's almost done. You could email either Ms. Peters or myself or the city clerk if you had information to add for this week. Again, that's just an encouragement so that everybody's knows what's coming on the agenda. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheasley. Appreciate that update. Any council members have a report to make? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to report that I also met with staff from Triangle Logistics property regarding that property at 48th and Forest. So just wanted to report that.
Councilmember Noble.
I met with Jason Rogers and his team last week about the comprehensive plan and about participation. I have pinned down some workshop times for my ward. And not unexpectedly, there are some people who are not fully trustworthy. Actually, it was one person who commented that, oh no, Susan Noble. I will, of course, officially record everybody's comments and make sure that they get to the city. But it also means that we all have our own followers. So anyone else who does it, you know, will have another audience. And so I hope other people will do it too, just so we can make sure that as many residents as possible participate in the comprehensive plan and the vision for Commerce City's future. I also sat in on the small business homeless session last week, the Zoom session, and I was very impressed with our new homeless navigator. And I know that the police department was as well, because that's what the commander said, that she's been very effective in the field already. And so that's great. And I look forward to that presentation coming before the city council. I have been looking for that form, Robert, and can I just send something else in tomorrow? And so I can get this scheduled?
Yes,
I would. Okay, and I would also, there was discussion as well about the Derby area, because a lot of this is happening in the Derby area. And that was the other study session that I would like, is to go back and look at the 10-year plan for the Derby area. I would love to hear from the Derby Advisory Board as well. And then my final question is with regards to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I know they're meeting this week, and I wondered if there is, if a city council person had been selected as liaison to that group, or will that group not have a city council liaison?
Council member, I don't believe that that one provides for membership for a council member, as the other commissions established by the council do.
Okay, does that mean that a council person can't, or does it just mean, or what's it mean? I don't know what that means, what you just
So
said.
everybody that's appointed to a committee right now is the establishing legislation for that committee provides for membership of a council member. Those meetings are, though, public, so there's no reason a council member couldn't attend. But it doesn't provide for membership by council. It's a direct relationship between the city manager or his designee and the committee.
Oh, that's interesting. And was that something that we decided upon?
The resolutions or ordinances passed for any commission include descriptions of the membership.
Right, but
And
I
yes,
don't recall a discussion about that.
I do not either.
Okay, did that come from the board and commissions committee?
The resolution was presented to council for review last fall. I was not involved in discussions with council on the contents.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. I met with Unye on the housing issues in Commerce City. Heard some very just bad testimonials on what our residents are going through right now. And so I just heard them out. I met with Hickenlooper's office staff, and I also attended the homeless webinar, which again, kudos to the staff members and everyone that presented. It was very informative. It's I just think we're really going to go into a housing crisis, especially in Commerce City, and we really have to do something. So yeah, and that's it. Oh, sorry, one more thing. May 20th is our last youth commission meeting. It's at Bison Grill, and then they're off for June, and we'll start back up in July with a retreat. We're going out there. If you guys know any youth, please. A lot of our youth are actually graduating, heading off to college, so our membership is low. I will be going into the high schools in the upcoming weeks. I presented to the Youth Commission for approval of the presentation that we came up with, myself and Mayor Pro Tem Frank, and they gave some good feedback. So now we'll be going into the high schools and trying to recruit, just because we had a lot of seniors this year, and we're losing a lot, which is good. They got to move on to the next step. So that's my report. Thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. I also met with Triangle Logistics last week and was very interested to see their presentation and what they've been working on with staff as far as bringing back a proposal to council related to the URA and financing structuring. And so I'm interested to see that come back before us, and was encouraged by their update.
Any other council members with a report? Seeing none. Let's see, last week had a Metro Mayor's Caucus meeting. We had great discussion over the transportation bill. We discussed that during the legislative subcommittee is to include some of the issues that some people have with the bill and whether or not we're going to support it. This time the city is monitoring. I also participated on the webinar that was done by our staff in the Small Business Center. Greatly appreciate a couple of things. One, the staff putting that together for our local businesses, but also for the city council for approving that position. I think that position is going to immensely help people in our community who need it the most. That evening, Councilmember Smith and myself participated at the county level event for the Adams County Mayor and Commissioner Youth Awards. Would like to once again congratulate all the awards and finalists and the nominees and the winners, especially those from Commerce City, and would like to thank Councilmember Smith for your continued support of the youth in our community during that. That is all I had for meetings last week. And with that being said, we have finalized our agenda. Any last takers on reports? Seeing none, have a good evening, have a good week. We'll see you all next Monday for a regularly scheduled council meeting. Good night.